situation. But let's jump into it. So my name's Michael Irwin and welcome to the webinar. What we're looking at today is how managers save 10 plus hours a week and yet have an even higher performing team. And this is what I've done with hundreds and hundreds, literally now over 900 different managers over the last 15 or plus years have been able to put this in place based on the guidelines and the programs that I've set up. So let's get in and see how it works. But first, just a little bit about me. I'm in Melbourne, in Hawthorne. I'm a Collingwood member and supporter. So unfortunately, even though I look quite happy in the photo there on the left, I was very unhappy with Collingwood's performance on Friday night, and we're out of the finals now. But anyway, such is life. I like to keep fit. I've been involved in sport and keeping fit all my life. So there's a photo of me in a fun run that I still get involved in doing a few times a year. And then in the middle is me at one of the many, many leadership programs I've run over the years. I'm on the left-hand side there. That was a 5-day residential program. And I really enjoy helping people to be at their best as a leader. And I've come to work out that's my passion. That's how I want to create a purpose, which is about helping leaders to be at their best. And then when leaders are at their best, the people around them are much happier and much more content and higher performing as well. So it has what I believe is a flow-on effect. So a little bit more about my background. I first became manager in my late 20s, jumped into the management as we were growing very quickly, didn't have any training. It was just like, here you go, keep working hard. And I worked hard and I thought I was doing really well, improving by trial and error. But it turned out that I wasn't doing as well as I thought. So I sort of dug in and worked longer hours and thinking that working hard was the key. But I realized eventually when I got some leadership training and some coaching that that was not what I needed to do. What I needed to do was do things differently and from a smarter, more strategic perspective. And I improved more in 1 year with that guidance and coaching and training than I had in the previous 7 years. And other people started to notice a difference in me as well. And they started to ask me about the change in my leadership and ask me to help them as well. Okay. So eventually, after nearly 20 years in corporate and traveling a lot, I decided to step out of the corporate role and become a leadership coach and facilitator. And I've run training for well over 1,500 people now, have coached one-on-one 300 managers, but also helped many hundreds of others outside of those leadership programs and group programs. And they have been able to work less hours and have a more balanced life, yet still get promoted, earn more, hit targets and have a higher performing team. A lot of these things that people didn't think were possible until they went through the training and or the coaching with me. And overall, it meant that they increased their job satisfaction. So this is what we hear from people, both anecdotally as we're talking to people, and also the research confirms that managers are struggling. Managers are even less engaged than the general employee population, which is quite low anyway. All right. And the number one reason is their workload and the worry about burnout, or actually getting towards burnout themselves, experiencing burnout. And that means they're less engaged. It creates overwhelm. Over 70% of managers experience ongoing work stress, and they're struggling with the overload and overwhelm. And when asked, 80% of managers feel that the organisation could have done a lot more to set them up for success in their role. Most of the time, people are given the opportunity in one way, shape or form. Sometimes it's thrown in the deep end like I was. So let's take a moment to just enable you to think about things and reflect where you're at right at the moment. Okay. So how are you performing right now? If you were to give yourself a rating out of 10, where 1 is really struggling, just keeping my head above water barely, 5 is kind of up and down, sometimes a bit all over the place, lots to do, reactive. At 10 out of 10 is you at your best. It's not perfect. That is an achievable personal best, 10 out of 10. Think of it like a sports point of view. What's the best that I can do? That's a personal best. That would be the equivalent to a 10 out of 10 in this situation. So take a moment to reflect. If you'd like to share, put it into the chat, and see how you're going. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is that very few, a very small percentage of people put themselves at 8 or 9 out of 10 on a consistent basis over the last 12 months or so, which means there's a lot of room for improvement. All right. So once you've thought through that, here's something else to think about. How happy are you with the number of hours that you work per week? Okay. So whatever you want that to be, and that's always your choice, but are you working the hours that you want to create the life that you want, the balance that you want? And if you are, that's again a 10 out of 10, if it's exactly what you want it to be. If you're working quite a few more hours than you want to, that might be a 5. If you're working lots more hours than you want to, it might be 2 or something like that. So how's that sitting for you? Okay. And we'll come back around to what that looks like in terms of connecting to performance later on, because it's not that more hours equals higher performance. As I used to think that, but now I know better. And then one of the things that's really important getting through this is, do you have the tools and resources that you need to enable you to be at your best? Okay. Or do you have to try and figure things out along the way? So think about all the tools that you need to be at your best as a manager and as a leader. Some of them are systems and processes. Some of them are also just about knowing, how do I give effective feedback? What does it look like? What's the model that I use? How do I have difficult conversations? How do I set people up for success? Do you have all of those types of tools? Right. Take a moment to reflect on that, and I'll tell you what other people have said as they've been through this reflection and this webinar, or use some of the other guides that I share with people for free. So the research has found that over 80% of managers rate themselves low. Okay, they're rating themselves between 3 and 6 out of 10 over the last 12 months, and they're up and down, sitting somewhere in between that 3 to 6. But of course, as you would understand, they want to be a lot better. Almost everybody wants to be 8 to 10 out of 10 every day, right? And they know where there's some areas that they could improve in, but yet they don't really know how to get there and stay there. Okay, so it becomes a struggle for them, or it becomes an acceptance that they're not performing as well as they probably could. So what does this look like? Okay, so this is the descriptions that other people have given me about their ratings. So those that are down and around about 3, below 5 out of 10, the confidence is regularly low. There's a very high workload. Often they're doing the manager role and some of the other roles within the team. They feel like they have to be the one to do all the hard and complex tasks, and it's just flat out. So there's no time left for being strategic or developing others. Okay. And intuitively, most people know that that means they're not going to be able to progress in the way they want to and develop in the way they want to. Now, those that are a bit higher, maybe around about 5, 6, 7 out of 10, they describe it as sometimes they feel like they're doing well, but then the confidence really drops off. So it becomes this roller coaster, just depending on what's happening. Okay, there's a lot of work still. But there's a little bit of elements of being focused on doing some things that can help them develop, like some leadership courses, or maybe reading some books or watching some webinars. But they quickly fall back into old habits. They really struggle to implement the things that they've learnt. They know they should spend time being strategic, but it's limited and typically not effective. And they're still seeing themselves as being stressed or overwhelmed, and they're really uncertain about where their career is going to take them. What we want, when we hear people who are 8, 9, 10 out of 10, they describe themselves as having high to very high confidence consistently, with this solid base that doesn't get pushed around. And they're working always on engaging and empowering their team members. That's the focus of the time they spend as leaders. Yet they're still able to hold people accountable and walk that fine line. They make time so they can add strategic value. They feel like they're being more proactive and far less reactive. So most of the efforts that they're putting is about being proactive. And that's a description of where I'd like you to be. So feel free to jump in and ask any questions, or let me know what's happening in your world or how you're rating yourself. I'm happy to tailor what we've got here to suit your needs or your situation. All right, well, I'll keep going on until I hear anyone come to me with specific questions or specific topics that they'd like to hear about. So what do we do to save these 10 hours a week and get your team to be performing at an even higher level? So there's some key things. Let's go through the top level points, and then we'll dive into a little bit more detail. And again, please jump in and ask questions about how these things work. So the first point that you can look at when you want to save some time is to reduce the amount of time that you're in meetings and sharpen up how some of the meetings run. Okay, so this can be some quick wins where you can quite quickly save 2, 3, sometimes up to 5 hours a week by being more focused and prioritizing and more strict about how meetings run and which meetings you go to. We'll come back to that soon. Changing the way that you look at email. By default, we can easily get into the habit where email becomes our way of deciding what we do next, prioritizing by email, and that's not effective at all. Thinking about a capacity, all right, and stepping away using a different planning process rather than having to-do lists, either to-do lists in your head or to-do lists on post-it notes or written down or in a digital format. They actually become ineffective quite quickly. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then the key one that really takes you into another level that goes from saving 5 hours to 10 plus hours a week is your leadership effectiveness. And how are you working to create a high-performing team where others are achieving the results and your team combined together achieves outstanding results because of your leadership. All right, so first let's have a look at meetings. So what most people tell me these days is that there's just a huge amount of meetings that are happening in their organization. Okay, so their managers are regularly in meetings with their teams, with other people, with stakeholders, project updates, lots of things going on, and lots of requests from various people within the organizations to be involved in meetings. Okay. So the first thing to look at as to where you can save some time is to stop going to some meetings. All right, and it's about developing skills around being assertive, all right, and be aware or letting go of the fear of missing out. And some of this depends on our personality as well, so it's something for you to reflect on with your own self-awareness. Okay, so as leaders, it's important that you do not just go to every meeting that you're invited to. Okay, so make sure that you think about that. You can save some time by not going to some. This could be, and we'll go into a few more points, but it could be based on a few different criteria, which we'll come to in just a second. The other part here is when you're running meetings, is sharpen them up, shorten them, make sure they run on time, start and end. And what people tell me quite quickly here is that by sharpening up these, it means that the time in between meetings is much more productive and valuable. Instead of meetings running 10, 20, 25 minutes over, and the half an hour or an hour that you thought you had in between meetings is now wiped out, which makes you less effective during the day. So there are definitely things that you can do to make sure that the meetings run better. Okay. And there's some key elements that you can think about in terms of planning and running efficient meetings, including having the right agenda, having a clear purpose for the meetings. Okay, why are we having this meeting? And that can be used as one of the reasons you decide whether you go to a meeting or you don't go to a meeting. If there's no clear purpose, if we don't know why exactly you're going to the meeting, then you can politely decline. Or you can say, I'm not sure whether I want to accept this. Can you tell me what's the purpose of the meeting, and send out an agenda? And also what role you would like me to play as part of the meetings. So if they're not clear, then I suggest that you start declining some of these meetings. Now, I know you can't decline all of them. Some of them come from your boss or senior management, and they might not have these things, and you can't necessarily decline many of those. But have a think about which ones you can decline. The other thing you can do as part of empowering and engaging your team members is give them opportunities to grow and develop and get others to go to some of these meetings instead of you. So that's something I really encourage you to think about. And your team members will enjoy that. Now, initially, most of my clients push back a little bit on here. Oh, my team members are already really busy. On the other hand, when you talk to them about an opportunity to step up, to be involved, to challenge themselves, to take on more responsibility as part of growing and developing, almost everybody wants to do that. All right. Any questions about meetings? Let me know now. We'll move on to email in just a moment. Oh, sounds like we're all good. We'll keep moving on. So one of the key things that people find themselves doing is checking their email all the time throughout the day, and email alerts come up. And this can be also included into many of the online messaging that we have as well today. And by default, what then starts to happen is that the looking at email or the alerts that come up are the thing, what you are using to base what you do. I'll say that again. These become the basis upon which you decide what you're going to do next, and you're reacting to what comes through. So you want to be able to change that and be much more proactive. Okay, see email and messaging from a different perspective. Email is not a to-do list. It's not a planning tool. It's not a prioritization tool. It's a communication tool. And you need to manage it rather than having it manage you by the amount of emails that are coming in. So what we need to really do is think about email is a way of communicating and interacting. And so I need to process what's happening with email in blocks and chunks, and I need to look at the emails in terms of their priority. And then I need to set aside email and focus on what are the priority tasks that I need to be doing. Simple way to look at this for those of us who are old enough to remember is when we used to get physical mail coming into our offices many years ago, decades ago now, we wouldn't open one piece of mail and then decide that we're going to do something about whatever that mail was, right? We'd have our 5, 10, 20 different pieces of mail or packages that would come in, and we would open one, have a quick look at it and decide, does it go into the bin? Is there something quickly that I do about it? Or does it get attached to a project, a priority that I'm working on with the bigger picture? Okay, and then we would clear through all of the physical mail, and then we would work on the projects and the key things that we need to be doing. We need to look at email in the same way. Don't get stuck with opening an email and then losing the next 20 minutes, half an hour to that task without thinking about where does this sit in terms of the priority of all my tasks. Create some email rules so that you've got less emails coming into your inbox. Get them to skip the inbox. One of the ones that works the best for myself and my clients is any emails where you're CC'd, and that seems to be growing and growing by the handful, by dozens every day, if not hour. If you're CC'd, then copy that to a separate folder and let people know that anytime you're CC'd, that goes to a separate folder, and you'll get to that when you have spare time, which of course is pretty much never. So if something's urgent or a priority, they need to think of a different way to communicate to you, at the very least putting you as one of the 2 people in the email. And that in itself can save you several hours a week by changing the way that you look at email. It will also change the perceived level of stress that you have when you feel like you're managing email in a different way. Now, it takes some effort and some practice to put those steps in place, because it can feel like there's a lot of pressure in your organization to just reply to emails very quickly. And that's something you need to think about, and again, be assertive and influential in changing that expectation. All right, so now let's have a look at overall planning and capacity. Most of us take on more than we can actually fit in any given day or a week, okay? And that's because we're thinking about things from a right now perspective instead of thinking about things from a bigger strategic perspective, a longer term perspective, and then connecting it back to what I'm doing this week and today. So first, start by knowing your strategic objectives and then focusing on knowing how to break that down into targets across a year, 120, 90, 60, 30 days, or a combination of some of those. Knowing what those medium to longer term strategic key outcomes and targets are, and having that top of mind all of the time. Okay. And then we connect that into looking at planning. So that connects back to planning weekly. And we want to do that and avoid to-do lists in whatever form you might use. And don't just plan on a single daily basis, because we've all got too much to do that can ever fit into a single day. And what happens with people who put together to-do lists, whatever form they use it, is that there builds up an expectation that there's this long list of things and you need to get it all done. And there's no sense of where it fits in and what's your actual capacity. Okay. Whereas if you use a weekly planning approach that connects into your strategic objectives, then you've got much more flexibility around what you're doing. And you've got a greater sense through blocks of time as to what's going to fit in on a given week and during a given day. You can also shuffle around those blocks of time to fit in as best to what's happening that week and the unexpected stuff that comes up, which it does. But you still keep an eye on what you need to do to meet your high priority objectives, rather than just going back to your email, for example, and then trying to respond to the last half a dozen emails that came into your inbox. So it's about thinking about doing your weekly planning and thinking about not just work, but having your whole life as a concept around your planning. So if you want to be happier and healthier, if you want to have better relationships and connections with friends and family, then that needs to go into your weekly planning, and there needs to be some boundaries set around that. You know, if you want to take your kids to school or pick them up, if you want to be involved with taking them to dance or being their football coach or something like that, then that needs to fit into this weekly planning, and you need to have some strong boundaries around that as well. And that will give you a greater sense of what your capacity is on any given week. It enables you to start saying no. Because what's most important these days is actually making sure you choose what not to do. There's too many things, too many messages, too many emails, too many requests to do everything. It's not possible anymore. So being effective is about clearly choosing and communicating about what not to do and what's not going to happen, or what time frame things are going to happen in that gets spread further, rather than trying to squeeze everything into one day or this week. So this type of approach gives you an opportunity to do that. Now, it makes you look much more capable with this sort of process, because people actually much prefer to hear the realistic version of what's going to happen, and that you deliver on what you say you're going to deliver on in a way that's sustainable, rather than having hopeful promises and being let down here and there, either by when things are late, or things meet a target, but the quality of the work is not the standard that you need it to be. So this is a huge change in how you can operate and know your capacity, set some boundaries, create a greater sense of respect and reliability. All right. Now have a think about, are you or people or your managers in your organization saying things like this? It's easier to do it myself, or when I do it, I know it'll be done right. Well, it's almost certain that their they're sabotaging themselves. Oh, I went too far. Sabotaging themselves from being the very best as a leader. And yeah, it's true. It can feel like in that moment that doing one of these tasks is easier just to do it yourself. Okay. Feels like, I'll just step in and make sure things get done. And that way, we won't fail as a team and we won't have that error because I'll be the one doing it. But it's not going to be the most effective way for you to operate. Right? And another one that the trap that managers fall into is giving your team members quick answers to all of their questions and all of the situations. This was one of the ones that I did for quite a number of years, thinking that, if I give quick answers to people, then they'll keep working, they'll keep going, and things will keep moving, we'll get better outcomes. What actually happens is they come to rely on you as the manager to fix all of the problems or make sure you have to give the answers to what the next steps are. It's not empowering them. And the same goes for telling people exactly what they need to do. One of the common things I talk about with people is how they're going about the delegation. And most people talk to me about how they very specifically and precisely tell the people in their team, little step by step, exactly what they need to do when they're delegating. Well, what happens there is that it takes all the initiative and the connection and responsibility away from the individual that you're delegating to. They need to be much more involved. So these seem like logical and correct things to do, but they actually reduce the productivity and engagement of your team and build more workload and stress and pressure on the manager, on you, the manager. So we need to do things differently instead of heading towards overwhelm, overload, or burnout. So what can you do? How can you do things differently? Well, it's about your leadership effectiveness and changing your mindset and really setting out to get things done through others and significantly reduce the amount of doing work that you as a manager are doing and increasing the capability of others. It starts with a foundation of trust, building trust in relationships. Okay. And that seems like, that's standard. That's what we do. And unfortunately, what happens is that managers aim to build trust, but without meaning to, they do a bunch of little things that break trust. So it really becomes about focusing on, am I understanding about the small things that I'm doing without meaning to, that could be just putting little chinks and cracks and chips in the foundation of trust, which makes it then not so stable. It's about being able to empower your team members so they are performing at their best and they're appropriately challenged in what they want to do and getting to do the things that they can do really well. It's about allowing them to experience taking on these responsibilities and doing things their way and trying things and letting them go through the process, even though it probably isn't as good as in fact, it's definitely not as good as if you did it yourself. But letting them have that experience is going to help them improve. And then if each of your team members are improving and growing and developing, then your team performs better and the outcomes improve significantly. And it's about being able to stick to these plans when it feels very difficult, that things might not be done exactly the way that you would do them or to the standard that you would or that you want. But it's part of the process of growing and developing others, and it's part of the process of looking at how others could step up to potentially go into your management position. Because one thing's critical here, we need a succession plan, because if you cannot be replaced in your role, then it makes it very difficult for your organization to give you other opportunities. Okay, so you need to be able to clearly developing others, so then you are seen to be someone who's growing, developing as a leader, and then you open up much more options for your career path. So you also need to think about, what kind of proven leadership tools do I have? What are the types of things that I need to be able to do as a leader? And do I know exactly how to do them? Do I know what effective feedback is? And then do I have a model that I can use that? How do I deal with difficult conversations or conflict? What are the 5 steps for setting people up for success? How do I do performance reviews? It's about the key things. What does it mean by building relationships and building trust? What do I need to look out for that shows that I'm building trust or that I might be breaking trust? These elements of leadership that you need to have proven models to go through. Okay. And I can provide you with those if you want. So I've given you a huge amount of information there on how you can save at least 10 hours a week and improve your leadership and improve the performance of your team. And you can go away and there's plenty there that you could improve significantly by yourself. And unfortunately, what tends to happen with people is that they walk away from these things and they don't actually change very much. So what would it cost you if you don't change? You know, if you're somewhere in the range like everyone else was, 3 to 6, most people were saying 3 to 6 in their performance out of 10, not happy with the hours that they're working, missing a whole lot of the proven information that will help them be at their best. If you keep going the way you're going, what does it mean? Slow growth and promotion, stress, burnout. How will you feel if you're in a similar position in a few years' time? Or you could get some help and fast track your way to being at your best as a leader with consistently high confidence, a highly engaged team, high performing, and multiple career options for yourself. So here's a couple of things that others have said about programs that I run. I won't read it out to you. Just let you read through it. And another one. So this is, Jude's example shows it's not about capability or intelligence. It's about knowing the subtlety of those key things to be able to do to change this situation. So think back again, how did you rate yourself in terms of your performance, your hours, your access to the tools? How will you get to be consistently 8, 9, or 10 out of 10? So if you want to find out any more, you can book in a time or ask me any questions. Email me to book in a time for a chat or ask any questions so we can go into more depth about anything that I've covered today and help you to implement them. So now it's really over to you for any questions. Any questions that I can help you with today? All right. Well, if there's no questions, that's great. Thank you for being here today. I'll go back to my email address for just a moment so you can take that down again. If you want to send me an email and anything, I will also send you out an email to let you know about the recording. And you can, yeah. So yes, I'll send you an email letting you know about the recording from today. So you'll be able to get that in the next couple of days and you can go back through any of the points there. And I said, make sure that you note my email address. And if there's any questions that come up as you're going back through the recording or the PowerPoint slide, please feel free to reach out and email me and I'll happy to help you any way that I can. Thank you for being on board today and enjoy the rest of your day.